The last thing on my list, number 5 here, is really sensitive to high temperatures down here. And what's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an awesome day. It is Saturday, January 4th here in South Georgia, and on today's video we're going to talk about the things that need to be first in the dirt this year. So in our last video we talked about that polar vortex that's on the way, coming later this week here, and it appears that that thing may have gotten hyped up a little bit on social media. I'm sure it's going to get really cold in some places, but not supposed to be that bad here, so that means we're full speed ahead with our planting. So while some of you may be hunkered down for the worst of winter right now, others need to be planting, or at least planning to be planting, some of these things that don't particularly like the heat, these things that need to be first in the dirt this year. So in this video we're going to talk about the things you should prioritize first, the things you should get in the ground first, because when it gets hot, these veggies aren't going to like it. We're not going to cover warm season veggies on this video. As most people know, the warm season stuff we have to wait until our last frost is gone before we plant that stuff. Now there is some strategy with the warm season stuff, planting some stuff before others, prioritizing some things before others because of pest pressure, and we'll probably cover that on a later video. But on this video we're going to focus on the things that don't really like the heat, the things we need to plant first. So the first thing on the list would be our brassicas. Things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, collards, kale, and other greens. Now if you're like us and planted these things in the fall and are starting to harvest them right now, you may not want another round of brassicas, but you may have some extra garden space and want to squeeze in one more planting before it gets too hot. And some of you maybe missed the fall planting window, or where you live is too cold to grow some of these brassicas throughout the winter, so you're definitely going to be planting some soon, but we got to make sure we get them in the ground early so that they have time to grow out before it gets too hot. Because as the days get longer and the temperatures get warmer in the spring, our harvest window on a lot of these brassicas will shorten. So the warmer it gets, the more prone these brassicas are to bolting or going to seed. So we have to be really careful about harvesting things in a timely manner in the spring as opposed to right now. Right now I can leave those broccoli heads on those plants for a lot longer than I can in the spring, especially if we get a random warm spell. Man, they can throw those plants for a loop, and next thing you know you've got seedy broccoli, or you've got kale or collards trying to bolt and go to seed. That's why we got to get this stuff planted early so we can get our veggies harvested before those kinds of things start happening. And then second on our list would be lettuce. So this beautiful Bower oak leaf lettuce has just kind of been hanging out in that raised bed. We don't have to be in a huge hurry to harvest this stuff. Holds really well this time of year. Now some of those bottom leaves there may start looking a little scraggly the longer we leave it in that bed, but we really don't have to worry about it bolting all of a sudden this time of year. But if we plant another round of this for a spring harvest, then we would have to be a lot more timely with our harvesting. We couldn't just let it sit there and hang out, because if we get a random 2 or 3 days of really warm weather in the spring, this stuff will bolt in a hurry, and all of a sudden you've got lettuce with seed heads on it, and a lot of times it can become bitter when it gets suddenly heat stressed like that. And then third on our list would be root veggies like beets and these carrots here. So this time of year our carrots from the fall planting are maturing and sizing up nicely. They hold well in the soil. We can just go out here to our raised bed and pick carrots whenever we need them. But if we plant another round of carrots for a spring harvest, that's not the case. As temperatures are warming in the spring, these things are a lot more sensitive and they can lose their quality a lot faster. With these yellow carrots here especially, what will happen is they'll start to get these green shoulders on them as the sunlight intensifies, as temperatures warm in the spring, and the texture can become compromised as the soils get warmer and warmer. Sometimes these things will get woody, kind of fibrous. They're not nearly as tasty as they are when they're harvested in cooler weather. And then as far as beets go, I don't really grow beets anymore, but we used to grow a lot of beets when we were selling veggies. And beets grown in the spring as temperatures are warming, the leaves are really sensitive to those sudden warm ups. And what I would have to do a lot of times is come out here and give them a splash of overhead water just to cool off those leaves. Even if we had them on drip irrigation, we get really warm all of a sudden, I got to cool off those leaves to keep those plants from being stressed too much. So we covered those first three: brassicas, lettuce, and then some root veggies. And the reason I mentioned those three first, or kind of group those three in the beginning, is because you've got a little more flexibility with those. Yes, you want to get them in the ground as early as your temperatures will allow. You don't want those things hanging around your garden when it gets real hot outside, but you've got a little bit of flexibility there. These next two things I'm going to mention have some fairly specific temperature thresholds that they don't like. So number 4 on the list would be taters, or potatoes, as some people like to say. And taters don't really like temperatures in the high 80s. So once your temperatures outside start getting in the high 80s, that's when those plants will start to suffer. As a result, to get a solid tater harvest, you need to give those plants at least 90 to 100 days, depending on variety, of cool weather, absent of temperatures in the high 80s. If you plant your taters too late, you're going to hit those high 80 temps too soon. Those plants are going to start to die, and they haven't been given that nice 3-month window of growth. That's why we got to get these things in the ground as early as we can, so we can grow them out completely, get some really nice sized tubers before it gets too hot and those plants start to die back. And if you've grown a lot of taters, you know this, but some of you may not know this. Taters can tolerate a light frost. Yes, it will burn the tips of the leaves a little bit, but it usually doesn't kill the plants. That's why we always plant our taters several weeks before our last frost. Even if they emerge from the ground, we start seeing above ground vegetation there, and we get a late frost, usually won't kill the plants completely, maybe just singe the leaves a little bit. So I'll be planting my taters around the middle of February. I like to tell people, take your average last frost date back up a couple weeks, and that's your ideal tater planting time. Now, a lot of the stuff you'll see online tells you to plant them a little bit later. And if you're in an area with milder summers where it doesn't get quite that hot, you might can get away with that. But if you're in an area where it warms up really quick in the spring, you need to get them in the ground as early as possible. So I've already got my seed taters ordered from Wood Prairie, waiting on them to be delivered so I can start the chitting process. I've got Huckleberry Gold and Baltic Rose coming, 2 varieties we grow every single year. We'll be doing a 30-foot row of each probably in this plot right here behind me. And then I've got a few other varieties that will grow out in our raised beds. So in the raised beds, we're going to be growing a variety called Sharpo Una, a new one they have that I've never grown. Another one called Red Port. They were calling that Aristook ND, and then the name changed on it, but it's a new variety they have. And then one called Butte. It's supposed to be a larger, more russet type tater. And as always, if you want to grow some of these varieties that we're growing, you can get them at woodprairie.com, and be sure to use the code LazyDogFarm to get a discount on your order. So we got to get those taters in the ground down here in about a month and a half. Now, as the temperatures do warm, if things get warmer than we want them to get while our taters are still growing, we can cool them off with some overhead water. And if they're well fed, sometimes they'll push through a little stretch there of some high 80-degree days. The last thing on my list, number 5 here, is really sensitive to high temperatures down here, and I really haven't found that I'm able to push it through warmer weather. Once it gets warm, these things are done. And if you haven't guessed what it is yet, we're talking about English peas, what a lot of people just call peas, but we grow many different types of peas down here in the South. We grow a lot of cow peas or field peas, and then we grow English peas or sweet peas as some people call them. So English peas do not like temperatures in the 80s, especially down here. When you couple our humidity with some 80-degree temperatures, you get 80 degrees for a nice solid week there, those English pea plants will start to crumble. Now English peas, the plants themselves can tolerate light frosts no problem. The pods though, you get some freezing temperatures when you've got pod formation going on, especially if those pods are full of peas, it can damage the pods. So planting is a little bit tricky for us down here. We got to plant these things now, grow them throughout the rest of winter, and kind of aim for the pod production to start after our last frost date. As I said, timing on that is a little bit tricky, but I found that if we plant right now, it gives us a pretty good shot at getting it right. Now, if you live in an area where it takes a while to get up to 80 degrees in the spring, you don't have as much to worry about. But if you live in a southern climate, you definitely need to be worried about it. You definitely need to be timely with your English pea planting. Nothing worse, and I've had this happen several times, nothing worse than putting a lot of love and time into several rows of English peas in your backyard garden, and then it getting too hot and those plants just crumbling, and you maybe get one little harvest off those plants before the heat zaps them. We don't want that to happen. We want to be able to get 2, 3, maybe even 4 harvests from those plants before the heat gets them. As such, I'm going to be dropping some seeds later today. Came out here earlier this morning, laid off 4 rows, got some drip tape down, put some coop grow down. We're going to plant 4 rows of English peas. I'm going to grow a bunch of them. And so I'm going to be planting a variety called PLS 595, and we do have seeds for this variety on our website now. PLS stands for Pure Line Seeds, I believe. So this is a variety that has done me very well over the last few years. A lot of different English pea varieties out there, lots of good varieties that you can plant, but this variety has treated me well, so I'm going to continue to plant it as long as I get my planting done in a timely manner. I don't wait around too late. We usually get some really solid harvests. So just to recap here on these things that need to be first in the dirt. Don't wait around on planting these things because there will be consequences when it gets too warm. Get those English peas planted first because they're really sensitive to warmer temperatures. Go ahead and be thinking about getting your taters ready and when you're going to be putting those in the ground. And then somewhere in between all that, if you want to plant another round of brassicas, lettuce, or root veggies, go ahead and get that figured out as well. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. As always, you can find a lot of the seeds we grow around here on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see how we'll be trellising these English peas once they get up and growing, watch this video right here. We'll show you a really simple and easy trellis with things that you probably already have. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.